The UAE's non-oil trade posted an impressive 27% rise last year, amounting to 1.9 trillion dirhams. For hubs like Dubai, the trading environment continues to drive the local economy. The industry is changing, though, along with the evolving global business environment. I'm Greg Fairley. Welcome to 50 MENA Leaders. Amir Magami, great to have you with us, Chairman of Global Feeder Shipping. What is the current outlook for the shipping industry?
Well, the shipping industry as a whole have been performing above expectation over the past couple of years. The container industry is part of that has been at historic highs. And we see that in terms of revenues and asset values. And that's as a result of combination of factors, including the increased demand because of many different reasons that we see now in the market. The excess of capital as a result of the government's COVID relief funds, the shortage of tonnage that we witness now because there's been lack of investments over the past couple of years, as well as the bottlenecks that still exist in supply chain. So we expect these market conditions to continue for the rest of this year and well into next year, and maybe see some sort of a market correction towards the last quarter of next year and early 2024. But as always, the market is very fluid and is dependent on so many factors. For instance, we just do not know how Russia's recent actions will affect the shipping industry. But we expect some sort of correction towards the later half of 2024.
What about sustainability in the shipping industry? How are you meeting the new green targets?
Well, there has been a lot of focus on the greener, more sustainable shipping, and these have been in lieu of many new regulations that the IMO has put in place for the industry, beginning with the low sulfur fuels earlier last year, into emission controls that are coming in early next year. So we're seeing a lot of new technologies, new innovations focused on both older ships as well as the new building ships in order to meet the regulatory needs. This will result in a cleaner, greener industry, which is something that we need and we definitely welcome. In addition to that, you have new innovations happening, new technologies being developed on alternative fuels, which is very interesting. And although too early to call, it would be a major change in what tend to be a very traditional industry.
We'll talk about technology in just a moment, but first of all, let's talk about the pandemic, the global pandemic. How did that affect the shipping industry, and how are any challenges now being overcome?
Initially, the pandemic affected the shipping like any other industry. I mean, the whole world came to a halt, and we saw that in major drops in volumes from both exporters and importing countries. This has since been relaxed and eased out of as countries change the views in general towards how to handle the pandemic. So you do see a lot of going back to the normal ways of operations prior to the pandemic. There's still a lot of bottlenecks in the industry at the moment. There is zero COVID policies in few countries, and specifically in China, that delays and creates bottlenecks in the supply chain that would have a negative impact on the operations of shipping lines, and in effect will have a negative impact on where the freight rates are. But the biggest, I would say, the biggest challenge to the shipping came in for the seafarers themselves. For almost 2 years, no seafarer could disembark the ship that they were working on. This is when they used to do 3 to 6 months on board a ship. They were now stuck for almost 2 years, which had a huge, obviously, psychological and financial effect on the seafarers. Thankfully, countries slowly began to change their policies as far as seafarers were concerned, and the UAE was among one of the very first countries that allowed disembarkation of the crew, that helped not only us but a lot of ship operators.
When do you see the shipping industry getting back to pre-pandemic levels then?
I think it would depend entirely on the way the demand is progressing at the moment. There's still an excess of liquidity in the market that drives this demand to historic highs. There's a shortage of tonnage in the market that should get resolved as more and more ships that have been ordered past couple of years start coming into the water towards end of next year in 2024 and 2025. But I think a lot of it has to do with, again, the pandemic restrictions that countries have. As they relax these restrictions, that we begin to see that some countries are doing that, this will resolve a lot of these bottlenecks that exist within the supply chain and hopefully bring the market back to more what we used to see prior to pandemic.
Now, you referenced technology just a little bit earlier on, and you know, how is technology going to change and is changing the shipping industry?
Shipping on the land side of things, and logistics, warehousing, trucking, technology has always been up to date with the latest and the most efficient ways of doing business that we had before. On the sea side, we've always been lagging, being more traditional on the ways that we set on doing. But technology is really driven by whatever regulations are at place at the moment. And recently there have been a slew of regulations targeting more efficient, more green operations, and that has really pushed a lot of new innovations and technologies coming into shipping industry and shipbuilding industry in particular. You see innovations like the scrubbers, where they clean the dirty fuel that we burn. There is new alternative fuels that are being developed to replace what we've been using for maybe past 30, 40, 50 years in shipping. So there's been a lot of interesting and environmentally conscious technologies that are driven by the new regulations that are coming into effect in the next couple of years, and I think that will have a very positive impact as far as the sustainability and the environmental impact of shipping.
Would you say that technology is being embraced by the industry, or the opposite's happening?
I do think it's being embraced, but that's mainly because we are bound by the regulations that govern the international shipping that most countries are members of. And because of this, ship owners have to follow these regulations and have to embrace it. And this is one of the reasons you see a lot of investment into technologies related to alternative fuels and cleaner operations, emission controls. And because of that regulations, I think it's going to be widely taken up by majority of ship owners.
Do you think there's enough innovation and innovative approaches at the moment in the shipping industry?
I think compared to what it was before, there is significantly more innovation now in shipping than it was. Shipping in general has been a very traditional industry. It's been set on its ways for way too long, and now with the new regulations focused mainly on environment and clean, greener operations, it will change the way we approach business and the way we develop our fleet and our business. And I think that's the same with almost every shipping company across the industry.
Whose job is it, do you think, to lead innovation in the sector?
Well, traditionally, again, in containers, it tended to be the bigger shipping lines who are more under scrutiny on their operations and under environmental impact. And these guys have been leading the way on new innovations and new technologies, along with the many shipbuilding yards around the world that continuously work in developing new technologies and greener, cleaner ships. You have the classification societies that are extremely helpful on suggesting and promoting new technologies. So there's a slew of corporations happening across the industry to to develop and embrace new technologies, specifically to the environment.
So what would you say are the major challenges at the moment in the industry, and how are they being overcome?
The biggest challenge in the industry at the moment still relates to the pandemic and the restrictions that the pandemic has imposed on the entire supply chain. And that is really something that is outside the control of the industry itself. It's geopolitical, and we are very much at the mercy of individual countries' policies towards pandemic. So this is something that I think will ease as we move forward, and we beginning to see that across many different markets, and we should be able to see some sort of normalcy hopefully soon, within the next year or so.
What are global feeder shipping growth plans at the moment, and how can investors feature?
We look at expanding our geographical coverage to beyond the service that we currently provide. Areas like East Africa, Mediterranean, Europe, and even Southeast Asia and inter-Asia trades are something that we are interested in, and we're studying to see how we can be more expanding and be more part of those markets. At the moment, the market environment might not be the best place to invest in new assets, given the historic high value of these assets. But along with our partners in the region, we will continue to look for new opportunities to expand.
Do you see a shift in your business moving, very much to the eastern side of the world?
Well, the East is always important as a business hub, as a manufacturing hub, and it's pretty much where most exports originate from, especially in these regions. Although it's an important market, the GCC region as a whole, and UAE in particular as a transshipment hub, will remain very important, especially for us and our expansion. We continuously will look to expand our coverage from UAE to the regional ports, and because we believe that UAE will remain a very important transshipment hub going forward. And the region itself is growing parallel to the Asian economies, and there's a lot of interesting new developments in the region and growth plans. So we are excited to be part of that and continue growing with the region.
How important is the UAE and Dubai in your growth targets?
Well, UAE and particularly Dubai have been essential in our growth. And we always consider ourselves that we grew with the UAE, we grew with Dubai, and their importance as a transshipment hub was and will remain an integral part of our strategy as we move forward. I think the UAE will continue to play a significant role in regional commerce and industry, and even beyond GCC into the Indian subcontinent and Africa. And they would be the forefront of as a transport and commercial hub for many years to come. So we will count on UAE to continue serving UAE as part of this supply chain.
And just finally, just briefly, what dynamics do you currently think the shipping industry should be looking at in order to go forward?
I think there has been enough attention paid to the supply side of things in shipping. There's a lot of ships that are on order that will come into water in the next couple of years that will relieve some of this crunch that we feel now on the supply side. I think the biggest dynamic the shipping needs to focus on is this environmental impact. We are not known for being the greenest of industries, and I think this is something that is very much in forefront of, especially in regulatory terms, but also in operations. And we're beginning to see a lot more demand from shippers, from customers, even from financiers and banks that demand investment in more greener and environmentally responsible projects rather than your traditional ones. And I think this is going to continue, and it's a positive outcome and outlook for the industry.
It's been really great talking to you. Thank you again, Amir Maghami.
Thank you so much.